Roughly a year ago, I watched the Barbie movie in theaters for the first time. You couldn't escape the marketing, it was literally everywhere, and that Ice Spice Nicki Minaj song was all over Instagram, TikTok, with everybody showing their pink outfits in excitement for the film. The movie went on to be nominated for 8 Academy Awards and countless others, just showing how much of a cultural phenomenon this was. Similarly, in 2022, the Bratz Flaunt Your Fashion game came out. If you guys remember, I actually played it on my channel. I saw several other people in my social media feed get excited for it, and that inspired me to want to buy it and play it for myself. It was really interesting for me to see how the Bratz franchise has had such a positive impact on other adult women. Most recently, I watched a documentary on Netflix about the origins of Black Barbie, which is really interesting. Definitely recommend y'all check it out. All of these collective experiences got me thinking what the appeal of these doll franchises are for adult women, especially those who don't necessarily consider themselves doll collectors or enthusiasts. So that's what I'm going to be discussing today. I wanted to do this video last year, but listen, last year I was down bad, so better late than never. One of the primary reasons I feel like adult women get excited for these franchises is because there's an element of nostalgia that connects us to our childhood. Barbie has transcended generations, and Bratz in particular has captured the attention of younger millennials and Gen Z. Most people define nostalgia as that warm and fuzzy feeling you get when reminded of memories from your past, especially ones that occurred in childhood. This is the definition of nostalgic from vocabulary.com. You feel nostalgic when you miss your childhood, people you know but haven't seen in a while, or the things that bring you comfort, like the nostalgic memories you feel when you listen to the songs you loved when you were little. The adjective nostalgic is often used to describe someone who is homesick and wants to be back at home with family. It always involves a wistful memory of times that now seem better or simpler. A nostalgic feeling can involve home and family, but it can also involve a longing for long-gone moments. Even beloved things, such as TV shows or athletes from a different era, may provoke the feeling of nostalgia. Brené Brown, who's one of my favorite social science researchers, in her book Atlas of the Heart, where she defines and breaks down various human emotions, she writes this in a chapter about nostalgia. Interestingly, nostalgia is more likely to be triggered by negative moods like loneliness and by our struggles to find meaning in our current lives. Nostalgia is a yearning for the way things used to be and are often idealized and self-protective version of the past. It's a place we go when things aren't quite what they seem. So I found this really fascinating because I wasn't expecting elements of a childhood toy to be associated with feelings of sadness. But when you think about it, it really makes sense. Like, let's use the Barbie movie example. If you remember America Ferrera's character, Gloria, in the way that she got reintroduced to Barbie, she was feeling kind of stuck and lost in her life and in her job. And she ended up finding her daughter Sasha's old Barbies. It reminded her of a time when her daughter was younger. Obviously, Gloria now is dealing with, the transition of Sasha going through puberty and aging up, which can definitely be a difficult time both for the teenager and also the parent as well. And she finds comfort in seeking out this toy, but really it symbolized a different time in her life. It symbolized something that seemed simpler, something that seemed better than what it is now. Whether or not you actually literally go play with Barbies, I think that principle a lot of people can relate to. In adulthood, there's a lot of things that are hard and challenging and difficult. Relationship problems, parenting problems, work troubles. And so it's very common for people to want to go back to a time that seems simpler, and whatever that means for you, whether it's your childhood, your college years, whatever safety and comfort looks like, a lot of people like to replicate that in their adult lives to bring them that sense of comfort and peace. Going back to the Brené Brown book, Atlas of the Heart, I really liked how she broke down the etymology of nostalgia. Nostalgia is actually a term that originated in the 1600s, and it has a pretty dark past. It involves Swiss soldiers being extremely homesick when they were away at war. Whenever they'd be reminded of a memory or a song or a sight or a smell that reminded them of being home, the soldiers would get extremely sick, demonstrating symptoms of loss of appetite, hallucinations, and even taking their own lives. It got so serious that bringing up nostalgic memories could literally be punishable by death. I bring that up to show that nostalgia is a little bit more of a complicated emotion than simply recalling fond memories of the past. There's an element of sadness and a homesickness that kind of shakes you to your core. With that being said, I do think there's a difference between nostalgia and simply recalling memory. Nostalgia has a sad undertone. It's like it's a wistful desire to go back to a former time in your life that you see as better or safer. Memory is simply recalling something and understanding that it had an impression on you, whether good or bad. Memory is saying, this happened, this is what I learned from that, or this is the impression it left on me. Nostalgia is saying that old time was better, it was safer, and it was more familiar. I wanted to break down the semantics of nostalgia because I see nostalgia as an emotion that is almost like a flag of something deeper going on. It's usually a sign of something else that may be unhealed or something that's really challenging in our present lives. And there's no doubt that people are struggling. Adulthood is very hard. I mean, groceries are expensive, living is expensive, people are having trouble getting jobs, keeping jobs. There's definitely a lot that makes living very difficult. So there's no doubt that people have this desire and urge for rest and comfort. So I think these iconic franchises from our childhood can kind of bring about these feelings of nostalgia that for some people might feel necessary to seek refuge from our everyday lives and the difficulties that we face. But another reason tied to nostalgia why I think many adult women have been drawn to the Barbie and Bratz franchises is because many adults are play deprived. So the following research about play is from the National Institute for Play, which is founded by Stuart Brown, who is a play researcher, but the organization also cites several additional researchers who have done work around this topic. So according to Dr. Stuart Brown, play is a state of mind that one has when absorbed in an activity that provides enjoyment and a suspension of sense of time. Play is self-motivated, so you want to do it again and again. Play is purposeless, all-consuming, and fun. And according to Dr. Peter Gray, another play author and researcher, in a playful state of mind, the player is very engaged, alert, mentally active, and focused on the activity, but is not stressed out about the activity. They have no fear of judgment, and there are no consequences that matter outside of the activity itself. The characteristics of play all have to do with motivation and mental attitude, not with the behavior itself. Two people might be throwing a ball or typing words on a computer, and one might be playing while the other is not. To tell which one is playing, you have to infer from their expressions and the details of their actions. So kids have an easier time achieving a play state because they're kids. They don't have the same amount of responsibilities or understanding of the world as adults do, or at least they shouldn't. This is where class, privilege, and intersectionality come into play. Ha! You see what I did there? Pun not intended. So I want to talk about a couple examples of how play can be robbed from childhood, and I want to focus on adultification and parentification. So parentification is a type of adultification, but the main difference is that parentification occurs within a home and adultification occurs outside of the home. The definition that came up when I searched this, I really liked, so I'm gonna just read it verbatim. Adultification and parentification are related concepts, but they have distinct meanings. Parentification occurs within the home and involves a child taking on adult-like roles and responsibilities. This phenomenon doesn't apply to a kid doing age-appropriate chores, say a 10-year-old cleaning their room or a 15-year-old mowing the lawn. Parentifying a child means tasking them with something developmentally inappropriate. Adultification happens outside of the home and refers to treating or considering a child as if they are an adult, often in a way that is wrong or harmful. So some examples of parentification. Parentification can show up if a child is required to work to subsidize their parents' income. Parentification can occur when a child is expected to be the caretaker or one of the primary caretakers of a parent or a sibling in the house. And this can be due to many things like a disability, an illness, an addiction, being low income. There's a variety of different factors. Parentification can also occur when it's the child's responsibility to account for the parents' emotions and soothe them if the kid is kind of like the emotional compass of the house. Those are just a few examples. A term that I've seen trending on social media is the term eldest daughter syndrome, where oftentimes like parental-like roles are often given to the eldest daughter of the family or the only daughter, because as society we see women as nurturers and kind of like caretakers within households where parentification occurs. Although it can occur for both boys and girls, I do see daughters typically being defaulted to assume that more parental-like figure. Eldest daughter syndrome, I've heard a lot of people feel like they are a second mom, also helping to raise their siblings. I would like to add that parentification is more likely to occur with some sort of deficiency in the home. Whether you're in a single parent household, whether or not you're low income, if there is some sort of disability or illness or addiction of a parent or a sibling, and even in immigrant families, oftentimes in first generation immigrant families, the kids are often expected to be the cultural brokers for their parents. Whether that's translating doctor's appointments or parent-teacher conferences. In immigrant families, it may be expected where kids might be able to pick up the new language faster or the new cultural expectations faster. They kind of become that bridge for their parents. But I do want to say that correlation does not necessarily equal causation. So just because you might be in a single parent household, just because you might be low income, just because you might be an immigrant, that does not automatically mean you're parentified. But these are some factors that can make parentification more likely to happen. I want to add a quick note here because I want to also make the point that I don't believe parentification is solely the fault of the parent. Of course, obviously the parents play a role, but there's also a ton of other factors. For instance, collectivistic cultures have more of an emphasis on family and sort of interdepending on family members to care for one another and look out for each other. Also, if you have someone that has a disability or some sort of addiction or illness in your family, the government should be, playing a role in making sure that people aren't burdened by medical bills. Our local and federal government and our communities also should make it a priority to support people who are sick or people who have disabilities. We have a collective responsibility to be more accessible so that all of the burden is not necessarily just on one person or a few members of the family. So I just wanted to add that I don't believe that parentification is always a sense of a parent having ill will or trying to be malicious. I think parentification occurs because of desperation or emotional immaturity of the parent. Those are just a couple reasons, but obviously there's more. The majority of parents, of course there's exceptions, but the majority of parents are doing the best they can with the information that they have. So I don't want to come across as if I'm solely placing the blame on parents for parentifying their children. They play a role, but also we have governments, we live in community. There are so many things we could do to support these families in a better way so that kids don't have to be the adults. So let's talk a little bit more about adultification. So some examples. Adultification can happen when you think kids or assume kids are older than they are and continue to treat them as such. This can happen more casually, but can also be more serious. If you remember in the case of Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old boy that was shot and killed by police, the police reported that he was a grown man and were basically treating him like an adult when he was, of course, a 12-year-old boy. Adultification can occur through sexualizing a girl's outfit choice with the assumption that she's trying to be fast or she's trying to be sexy or she's trying to attract a man's attention. I know a lot of people can resonate with something like that happening in their lives. So at its core, adultification is treating kids like they are adults in a way that is inappropriate and harmful. But there's also such thing as adultification bias. And the bias part refers to the fact that typically this occurs more frequently for Black kids. In a 2017 study called Girlhood Interrupted, the Erasure of Black Girls' Childhood, the study found that adults viewed Black girls as less innocent and more adult-like than white girls of the same age, especially between the ages of 5 and 14 years old. When compared with white girls, Black girls were perceived as needing less nurturing, protection, support, and comfort, being more independent, and knowing more about adult topics, including sex. Almost all the Black girls and women we talked to said they'd experienced adultification bias as children. They overwhelmingly agreed that it led teachers and other adults to treat them more harshly and hold them to higher standards than white girls. Adultification is a form of dehumanization, robbing Black children of the very essence of what makes childhood distinct from all other developmental periods: innocence. Adultification contributes to a false narrative that Black youth's transgressions are intentional and malicious instead of a result of immature decision-making, a key characteristic of childhood. I've heard several examples of people my age or around my age share kind of similar sentiments of kind of, responsibilities that they've had at younger ages, which is not fair. And it kind of led me to ask this question of if girls are really more mature or if we're just expected to be. Like I said, adultification can also occur with boys. I was interested in seeing the gender disparities with this because I was interested in seeing how this maybe affects adult women differently, potentially. And I think the answer to that question, are girls really more mature or are we expected to be? I feel like this can be answered in part biological, but also in part socialization. It is true, research shows that on average, of course, on average means this occurs on average, but it does not apply to everybody in every situation. So if it don't apply, let it fly. But on average, girls start puberty 1 to 2 years before boys do. And that maturity gap, both cognitively and physically, starts to narrow more by high school age. But I also don't think that that in and of itself means that girls are equipped to handle adult responsibilities. Because at the end of the day, they are still children. And I think placing these types of responsibilities upon girls can definitely be harmful to them down the line, understanding their role in relationships, whether or not it's romantic or platonic, and it can also cause harm to their development. Of course, losing out on some of those childhood experiences that maybe other peers got to experience, or with just your understanding of your place in the world. This is more of just my interpretation, but I'm interested in hearing what you guys think. Have you had adults place adult-like responsibilities on you? And if that was your story, what impacts have you seen in adulthood? I want to also mention that there are many reasons why someone could feel like they miss out on their childhood. Obviously, I honed in on parentification and adultification, but there's many other reasons that could cause the same feeling. On the flip side, you could have overly strict parents that kind of prevent you from hanging out with friends or experiencing a lot of those developmental milestones or, I guess, expected childhood experiences. If you're someone who has experienced bullying as a child, that can cause you to miss out on childhood experiences. Or if you have a PTSD, those are just a few examples, but of course there are many more. Plug in your own example here. Adultification and parentification are not the only reasons why someone could feel like they missed out on childhood. But kind of going back to this idea of robbing children of their childhood and being in a play state, I want to read a little bit about why play is so critical for children. So according to Stuart Brown's National Institute for Play, very few of the neurons in the upper cortex of our brain are connected at birth. It takes activation from the environment to create connections. Play is a way to establish new connections. It primes the cortex for the development of the neural pathways that create our physical, social, emotional, and cognitive capabilities. So the more children are in a play state, the more brain circuits form and build their skills. Playing literally wires the brain for the skills we use our whole lifetime: physical agility, social confidence, emotional regulation, creativity, and resilience. As adults, time spent in a play state increases our resilience. It activates neural pathways in the brain that mitigate the effects of stress. Dr. Brown also discovered that play deprivation in children increases the prevalence of depression, inflexibility, and poor adaptability to changing conditions, lack of empathy, poor impulse control, addictive predilections, and mood-driven behavior, and sometimes violence. There's another researcher that one of my channel members actually recommended to me. So thank you for this recommendation. But Ruha Benjamin, she recently released a book called Imagination, a Manifesto, or I guess kind of recently. But I was listening to one of the interviews that this channel member sent to me, and she talks about the study of Finnish students, so students from Finland. Finland has some of the highest performing students when it comes to academics and in the educational system. And Ruha was explaining in this interview that the Finnish actually don't start teaching the kids academics until they're about 7 or 8, because the focus on those primal years is all about play.
The kids they're not in school, they don't learn to read and write and do math until they're like 7, 8. The focus for those early years is on play, and they take it seriously. Like the teachers are watching them play, documenting it, because they realize they're learning so many things through play, right? Collaboration, they're learning communication, they're learning how to care, mutual aid, whatever. And so what's kind of paradoxical, if you think that play is frivolous, is that these same young people from Finland, when they are tested by these institutions, these international testing agencies that want to rank countries, the kids that are not focused on testing and not focused on this overly disciplined, rigorous curriculum, they out-test everyone else. They have much more recess time, much more attention to all of these other capacities that we should be building. And so again, thinking about that inverse relationship between greater focus on play and fun, and speculation and imagination. There's lots of examples in the book where I'm trying to show us these concepts at work, so they're not just theories, but we can see it on the ground.
So yes, children who are allowed to play are faster learners, more creative, more empathetic, and more socially competent. Play is definitely critical in childhood, but it is also just as crucial in adulthood. According to the National Institute for Play, adults who play experience less stress and more optimism and well-being. And also, a person's play experiences have a profound influence on the shape and quality of their lives. Very accomplished people tend to have lives that allow and embrace play, and those with unhealthy, rigid, unproductive behaviors are often seriously play deprived. So play can look different in adulthood, but it is so important to still invest in it. I don't know if it was Dr. Stuart Brown who founded this, but somebody created, or some researcher created, a list of play personalities and ways that adults can still express playfulness without necessarily, playing with toys, or I know we're gamers here playing a video game, even though that definitely is a way that you can express play. But I'll go ahead and link some information down below about play personalities so you kind of figure out what are ways that you can still experience play and express play and receive the benefits of play as an adult, because we're not taught this and it may not seem as cut and dry. So in conclusion, to conclude this first section about nostalgia and play, I think part of the appeal of these doll franchises for adults is due to the sort of dissonance between cultural norms and expectations and true fulfillment. We're taught that play is a waste of time or less important as we age. Think about how recess is taken away from at least the American public school system at a pretty early age. I know my school system stopped recess at middle school, so we were 11, 12 years old. But also there are some circumstances that we're discouraged from play, whether it's due to adultification or parentification or other sociocultural factors. But there comes a time where we realize that playfulness is needed in our lives to really live a full life. Whether or not you call it play, it's needed to be active, engaged members of our families and society. Play is needed to perform our jobs to the best of our abilities and really to show up as the best version of ourselves. Play is definitely a form of self-care. So I think the resurgence of these doll franchises and kind of repackaged for adults kind of tugs at our feeling of nostalgia when this reality that childhood is no longer, but also adulthood is not quite what it seems, or at least for me, adulthood is not as it was advertised to me. I think these franchises tug on that feeling of nostalgia and remind us that play is important. Re-experiencing play is a kind of a way to tap into your inner child, recognizing that that inner child was important then, but also that inner child can be nurtured now. So I feel like the principle of, say, the Barbie movie or playing Bratz as an adult is less about literally playing with, childhood toys, but more about tapping into childlike innocence, childlike wonder, and experiencing play in a way that feels good to you as an adult, in a way that's fulfilling, because it's hard in these streets. And so I definitely recommend reading about the play personalities, figuring out what play looks like in your life, and practicing it one step at a time, because we could all use the benefits of play, and we definitely all need some more self-care in our lives. So going back to my original question, why adult women have expressed a lot of excitement for these franchises in recent years, I think another reason they're drawn to them can be in part a protest against patriarchal systems. I want to first be clear that you do not have to actively hate women for you to partake in the patriarchy or in misogyny. Patriarchy is internalized, much like racism, and among other things, internalized misogyny or internalized patriarchy suggests that things generally associated with women in our interests are less valuable, less important, and not worth our time nearly as much. For example, if we're going to go with this doll metaphor, think about the ways people differentiate playing with dolls versus playing with action figures. At the end of the day, they are the same thing. An action figure is still a doll, but there's a clear distinction that we make in our society, that a doll is not an action figure. These are two different things for two separate demographics. The idea that spending too much money or too many hours on cosmetic things is seen as vain, whether or not you like buying makeup or getting your hair done, getting your nails done, your lashes done. If you like, going shopping, there is a kind of underlying assumption that partaking in these things can come off as vain. We can take this to the workplace. Male bosses are often seen as leaders, while female bosses can sometimes be seen as bossy or bitchy for expressing the same thing, essentially, for doing the same job. The term chick flick is also used to devalue films that target women audiences or are typically about female protagonists and female casts, in contrast to what some may consider real films. We can even go back to think about how the Barbie movie was either acclaimed or criticized in certain spaces, compared to Oppenheimer, for example, that came out the same day. Similarly, if we want to talk about gaming, gamer gatekeeping implies that video games that typically have large female audiences are somehow lesser than or not real games and can't be considered real gamers, compared to, say, like Call of Duty or Valorant. Of course, I don't believe this, but there are people out there who still subscribe to beliefs like this. Okay, quick pause. Before I tell the story, I feel like I gave too much identifying information, so I'm just going to preface the story with this. Over the past year, I've had the privilege of attending a variety of industry events with content creators, and I've been able to connect with various creators both online and offline. And so the story has occurred at one of those functions. I was talking with a gaming creator about all things content creation. There was another male gaming creator who was trying to figure out how to make a YouTube short for this video game. And so I kind of just explained like the process of how I do my YouTube shorts with gaming content and how I format them. And the first thing he said to me was, "No offense," which, first of all, if you have to start a sentence with "no offense," you probably shouldn't say it in the first place. Some of your opinions you should really keep to yourself. But yeah, this man basically said, "No offense, but I don't think you would understand what I'm trying to do," essentially. And what he was trying to imply is because I play what, people would consider casual games, that basically my advice on how to format a YouTube short was basically irrelevant and not useful to him at all. So this guy was very dismissive, and that really did upset me for a number of reasons. But examples like this happen all the time. I'm sure several of y'all have examples that y'all can list right now. And also, if you're trying to find out who this is, if you're watching this video, I can guarantee you it's not you. I can guarantee that this individual has never watched a single video on my channel, but just trying to be friendly and supportive as a fellow content creator, I ended up being slapped in the face with this, you're not a real gamer rhetoric, which was not very blatant, but we understand the subtext. So yeah, with that being said, misogyny can show up in various ways. You do not actively have to be hating women to partake in misogynistic or patriarchal systems. So I feel like Bratz being the contemporary teen girls running their own fashion magazine, and Barbie being the multi-hyphenate career woman with her own hot pink car and dream house, they represent this idea of femininity, but in a way that's an asset, in a way that's empowering and is not stopping them or slowing them down, which is definitely the opposite messaging we get in the real world. One of my favorite commentary channels, Tiffany Ferg, she has a really great video breaking down the not like other girls like trope or meme. It's actually one of my favorite videos of hers. I think it's really good about exploring internalized misogyny, how it shows up in internet culture and in our daily lives. And there was a comment left under that video that says this: "Feminism is overcoming your hatred of pink and realizing it's a nice color." So obviously this comment has 18,000 likes, so a lot of people resonated. And the reason I included it in here is less because of the literal meaning of this comment, but it's more of the principle of it. In society, we are typically taught that things associated with women and their interests, the color pink, for instance, are lesser than, less important. I, as a kid, had an I hate pink stage. So when you get to a place where things that stereotypically are associated with women and their interests, whether it's the color pink or whether it's makeup or fashion or whatever the case might be, realizing that those things are not any lesser than is kind of like a personal transformative journey that many girls get to at some point in their lives. There's even a study I came across that showed that internationally, the color pink is the least liked favorite color in all different types of countries, which I thought was interesting, but also it doesn't surprise me. But anyways, I want to be clear that liking the color pink or, liking the Barbie movie, or, these Bratz franchises, like these things existing obviously do not solve inequality. I was saying in the intro that I watched a documentary on Netflix about the origins of Black Barbie, and one of the people interviewed in that documentary said, "Barbie is not going to do the work that you have not already done," which I love. Obviously the Barbie movie covered, feminism. It was like a feminism 101 movie, but obviously the mere existence of Barbie is not going to change societal structures and systemic injustices. Barbie is not going to solve the pay gap, for instance. But I feel like these brands, Barbie or Bratz, embracing femininity, despite what messages we might receive from society, can be empowering for some women to kind of take back their power and embrace stereotypically girly traits as something that's an additive or an advantage and not the opposite. Barbie is the epitome of girlhood. It is the stereotype we think of when we think of what little girls like and are into. Of course, stereotypes are generalizations, so of course, not all girls care for Barbie. The reclaiming of her, I definitely think symbolizes something a bit deeper in our society. That girls in our interest, we are just as important and valuable too. And also, it is possible to be interested in some even stereotypically girly things, but also like things that might be stereotypically associated with boys. People are multi-dimensional beings, and we're not obviously subjugated to gender norms and expectations. All right, so we've made it to the end of the video. So I want to talk a little bit about why I wanted to make this video. So obviously Barbie and Bratz were kind of the inspiration or the jump off. I'm obviously wearing my Barbie pink today to represent. I feel like the Barbie Barbie and Bratz craze, especially amongst adult women, have almost represented like this personal transformative experience that I and also many other women and girls have gone through. Play is also taken from kids way earlier than it should be, whether it's due to things like adultification or parentification that interrupts our childhood, or just the societal expectation that play is somehow non-essential once you reach adolescence. Many adults and also many kids are play deprived, and eldest daughter syndrome and misogynoir definitely makes these disparities even more prevalent for women and women of color. Reclaiming Barbie and Bratz is, in a sense, reclaiming our sense of play and adventure, which is way too often robbed of kids, but girls especially, as they age. I feel like embracing play is, in a way, embracing what was lost from our childhood, and is also a way of making sense of our complex adult world when feelings of nostalgia hit when hard times come. I feel like the revitalization of these franchises serve as a reminder to invest in ourselves, to invest in play, and the fact that it's okay to tap into our inner child. I don't know really how to end off this video, but definitely take a look at the sources down below. I'll link them, especially the one about play personalities, because I think that one's really fascinating and definitely can be useful to you guys as a takeaway from this video. But yeah, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. What are your thoughts and experiences playing as an adult? What did you learn today? I would love to know. Also, a quick plug. So I have been vlogging on my channel memberships. I have 2 tiers of memberships. The $5 tier is the one where you get exclusive content. I posted a few like vlogs and behind the scenes of what I've been doing when I haven't been really uploading to this channel. So be sure to check that out if you want to. It's been kind of fun over there. But that being said, my name is Asmara, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, y'all.